Hi guys, welcome to my ranking of Series 1 of Doctor Who. Now, in 2005, there was a long hiatus from the last time Doctor Who was on our screens. Series 1 reignited Doctor Who, and still to this day is one of the strongest series of the whole show. I thought it'd be interesting to go through the whole of Series 1 and rank all the episodes. So that's enough waffle, let's get on to the ranking. Coming in at last place is the episode The Long Game. Now, I've always found this episode to be quite forgettable. I do love how it sets up the consequences of the Doctor's actions when you realise in the finale that the Doctor getting involved in this episode causes the Earth to become polluted. I think this is a really interesting concept because it shows you that the Doctor's actions really do have consequences. The world building that Russell T Davies does in this whole series is just incredible, and he'd grow to perfect it in future series. I do still really like this episode, and I like how it's this kind of post-Dalek, darker story, which challenges themes of conformity and class, as well as messaging about the news and television and how it can control and shape our lives. Having Simon Pegg in this episode was definitely a bonus, and I think the Mighty Jagrafest does work in the episode. I just feel like it's missing something that a lot of the other episodes in this series have. It might be the addition of Adam as a companion. It was really difficult to rank an episode from Series 1 in last place, but I just think The Long Game is probably the weakest. The first trip back in time for Rose and the Doctor was the Unquiet Dead. Now, the setting of this episode is absolutely amazing. I love the nod back to this episode in The Unicorn and the Wasp, where Donna exclaims, "It's like being with Charles Dickens at Christmas with ghosts." I really love the moral question this episode poses, where the Gelf asks to host dead bodies to be able to be physical again. The way Rose and the Doctor talk about it really shows their difference in personalities, and that Rose is taking obviously the more human side, and the Doctor is thinking more in a logical, less emotional side. This episode does work in a lot of ways, and of course sets up the whole bad wolf. However, I think Charles Dickens is somewhat wasted here. I think Doctor Who would go on to perfect the concept of historical figures in Doctor Who. But this episode is still very strong. I just don't have too much of a personal connection to it. So the first two-parter of New Doctor Who was Aliens of London World War III, and it's a decent go at a two-parter episode. However, I think a lot of the humour in this episode hasn't aged too well. I do love just how on the nose the political messaging in this is. I think the Slitheen are a really great villain. Harriet Jones is great in this episode. I think one of the strongest bits in this episode is when Jackie Tyler has to call the Doctor, asking, "Is Rose safe?" and that would he be able to always protect her? It gives the Doctor a moment of realisation that he can't really promise these things. This call would come back later to haunt him in Dalek and in Bad Wolf, when he was under the impression that Rose had died. Now, the narrative of this episode is quite ridiculous. However, I think the whole Mickey Smith sending nukes to Downing Street was a little bit too over the top, even for Doctor Who. However, I can't deny that it gave us a very iconic scene of Downing Street blowing up, and all the Slitheen family panicked moments before the explosion. But yeah, this episode is a very solid iteration of the two-parters. I think Boomtown is one of the most underrated episodes in the whole of the show. I think for a while people just treated it as a kind of filler episode before the finale. However, I think it's a really important story. It reinforces continuity, practically set up a whole other show, and it's just a really great character exploration, and also answers a lot of questions about the year that Rose was missing. I love in shows when they have episodes where it's just characters talking and interacting with each other. If you love the characters, then it's really interesting just to see how they get on with each other. This episode also wraps up the whole Slitheen plot from Aliens of London World War III, and also sets up the Heart of the TARDIS, which would be used in the finale. At number 6 is the second episode in the series titled End of the World. This episode gave Doctor Who a really great opportunity to show off its modern makeup effects and CGI, which for the most part in this episode have aged pretty decently. It does kind of feel like they blew all the budget on this episode. I still think it's so funny that the Spider-Bot was able to incinerate the host just by pressing a couple buttons. It might have actually just been one button. This episode's really good in exploring the Doctor's background, which was only hinted at kind of briefly in episode 1. The very hardened and guilt-ridden Doctor, maybe subconsciously taking Rose to the end of the world so that someone else can understand the pain that he's feeling at this moment. Cassandra as a villain is great in this episode. I think she worked way better in this episode than in New Earth. I want to highlight as well that the ending of this episode is brilliant, and some of the quotes of it I still think about to this day. The world is finite, we're not on here for that long, so make the most of life. Coming in to the top 5 on this ranking is the first episode of New Who, titled Rose. I genuinely don't think there could have been a better start for the show to really reignite the fans and to make people believe in Doctor Who again. It just hits every mark so well. It does a great job of introducing fans to the new sort of camp tone that's prevalent throughout the whole show, as well as the scary side to Doctor Who as well. That opening with Rose in the basement with all the shop dummies still scares me. I really love how mysterious the Doctor is in this episode, as well as how they show people that follow the Doctor and are trying to kind of work out who he is. We'd see this concept revisited in Series 2 episode Love and Monsters. The character of Rose gets the perfect introduction. You understand completely who she is pretty much instantly. This episode as well does a great job at using the locations to further the story. I always love when Doctor Who uses real landmarks to further the story. Now, I just love this episode, and it's just so perfect for what it's trying to do. It'll always be a really, really great gateway into the world of New Who. I can't imagine how great it would have been to be an old fan of Doctor Who and to see Dalek for the first time. Everything about this episode is so iconic. I love the new design of the Daleks. Funnily enough, and very nerdy I know, I actually own a full-size Dalek. It's the best thing I've ever bought. I think over time the Daleks really lost their fear factor, but here it's so prominent. The Dalek is genuinely a scary force in this episode. The fact that only one Dalek could cause so much destruction really hones in on the terror of just how powerful they are. This also ties into the finale, because if one Dalek can do this, then what can hundreds of thousands of Daleks do? Finally, in this episode, the Doctor can truly face the Time War again. There's some really great dialogue between the Dalek and the Doctor. I think one of the best bits is when the Dalek draws a comparison between the Doctor and itself. There are genuinely a lot of similarities with this war-torn Doctor. Rose absolutely shines here, and this is one of the episodes where we truly see Rose helping the Doctor overcome the Time War. Something that once again would be brought up later in Doctor Who, when the 10th Doctor tries to tell Rose that she needs to now help the Meta-Crisis Doctor just as she helped him. The setting of this episode is really interesting as well, that being an underground museum. Hitting our top 3 is the episode Father's Day. Now, this episode is one of my favourite explorations of how we perceive people that have passed away. The way Jackie has talked about Pete Rose's whole life, you'd think he was an amazing person. The way she glamorises things that he did that she actually hated but looks back on fondly really hits the emotional core of the episode. Now, paradoxes in Doctor Who go hand in hand, and I can't exactly say the continuity of the Reapers in this episode has been amazing since the episode came out, as we've never seen them again. However, I quite like that they are just in this episode, because I think the purpose of them is perfect in this episode. They're not necessarily a villain in my eyes. They're only there to mend the wound that Rose created by saving her dad. I like to think in Pete's last moments when he's looking at Rose, he does remember. This episode as well is really great in demonstrating the consequences of their actions, that Jackie's story by the end has actually changed. I remember there was a Jodie Whittaker episode where a similar thing happened, where I think Yasmin interfered with her family's heritage. However, there were no consequences to her actions, meaning that the episode felt really redundant. It's so funny to think that they perfected the idea of consequences in time, about 15 or so years before the Jodie Whittaker episode came out. The idea of the universe having to give something back to people has been prevalent throughout the whole show. I think it's a natural instinct to relate time travel to personal gain, whether it's Adam trying to get rich, or Rose trying to save someone she loves. I think as well this is a really great episode to introduce someone to Doctor Who, as a lot of its themes are quite drama-based, rather than sci-fi. Those personal interactions between the characters really home in on the realism of the episode, despite it being about time travel. I just plain love this episode so much, and it's always been really high up in rankings of Doctor Who. In second place is the two-parter, The Empty Child and The Doctor Dances. Now I believe this is the first episode written by Stephen Moffat, who would go on to be a future showrunner of Doctor Who. His blend of horror and sci-fi works so well in so many of his episodes, and I would normally say that he'd later go on to perfect this, but his first iteration of the blend of horror and sci-fi in Doctor Who works so well. This is such a perfect episode. It's dark, scary, humorous, depressing, and heartwarming all at the same time. The characters are really strong here, the villains are incredible, the gas mask zombies are just so scary. The fact that it's not just a mask on their face, it's actually fused into their skin and molecular bone structure makes it even more terrifying. That transformation scene in the hospital still gives me nightmares. The continuity of the hospital is really great, and once again gives an example of the great world building that RTD's Doctor Who has. We have the introduction of Captain Jack Harkness here as well, who is an incredible character. I'm so glad he came back in Series 3 and Series 4. Series 2 definitely did miss him. The revelation to this episode is so heartwarming. The fact that such a distressing and scary episode can have such a happy ending is such a great artistic choice. Something, again, later would be replicated by Stephen Moffat in Silence of the Library, Forest of the Dead. The setting of this episode is amazing as well, that being during the Blitz. I love the funny scene where the Doctor goes on stage to ask if anyone's seen anything falling from the sky. That bit always cracks me up. The iconic line, "Are you my mummy?" came from this episode. This episode has just managed to stand the test of time so well, and is deservingly in the number 2 spot. I just think there's one more episode which is better. At first place is the finale of Series 1, Bad Wolf, Parting of the Ways. This is the perfect payoff to the whole Bad Wolf story arc. This is the best Dalek story in the whole of New Who, and potentially the whole of Doctor Who. They are so threatening in this episode. I love the addition of iconic 2000s game shows being turned dark for audiences' pleasure. It really gives a great kind of idea of this dystopian future that the Doctor has actually created through his actions. Pretty much every death in this episode is so heartbreaking, other than Johnson from Peep Show who gets murdered by a Dalek. Linda's death is really heartbreaking, considering there is a feasibility that she could be the new companion. I think the inevitability of the Daleks here makes the episode really scary. You know they're going to reach the Doctor eventually. You know that they're going to have to go through all these people standing in the Doctor's way, dying in his name. I think the Bad Wolf series arc is so clever, and it really is paid off in this episode. Every single thing that happens in this episode has been set up by previous episodes, whether it being the Bad Wolf, the heart of the TARDIS, the consequence of the Doctor's actions in Long Game, when Rose mentions to Jackie that she was the woman that was caring for Pete when he was dying, the relativity of time which was set up on the phone call in End of the World between Jackie and Rose, basically making the point that even though they're in 2 different times, it is still happening at the same time. Just everything is paid off, and it's the greatest regeneration story. I really wish Christopher Eccleston had another series in Doctor Who. He was such an incredible Doctor, and what a perfect way to go. I go through phases where this episode is actually my favourite in the whole of Doctor Who, and I don't think the nostalgia I have for this episode influences its ranking, as I always liked this episode, but I actually preferred a couple of other episodes from this series. However, in the past 5 years or so, I've grown to really love this episode. So finally, that concludes my ranking of all the episodes from Series 1 of Doctor Who. Thank you for watching. Let me know down in the comments how you would rank Series 1, and if you agree or disagree with some of my points. I'd love to hear them, just remember to keep it respectful.